Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelancer writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series. Take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video I'll be reviewing the Sorcerer subclass supplement, say that 5 times fast, Blackstaff's Book of Bloodlines, designed by Micah Watt, Elise, Cretel, Jeremy Forbing, Bryan, Holmes, Ryan Langr, Issac, Ian Peace, and Kathleen Harrington for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This review has been sponsored by the publisher. Review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you are interested in a sponsored review, please reach out via email, Twitter, or Discord, or on my submission form via roguewatson.com. If you enjoyed the content, consider using my affiliate links for online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. So last year, I did a review for Blackstaff's Tome of Wizardry, I believe it was called, which included 31 subclasses for wizards, as well as over 100 spells, and I liked it quite a bit. This is Blackstaff's Book of Bloodlines, which includes 31 new sorceress origins and over 100 spells, and I like it quite a bit. It is designed almost the exact same way, with the same collaboration of designers, the same formatting, layout, all of that, and generally the same quality. I think I like this one more, and I did go back and look at my review and skim over Blackstaff's Tome of Wizardry. I think I like this one more than that one, but I'm not sure if that's because I like sorcerers more than wizards, or if I do like the subclasses more than the subclasses in the wizard book. For being honest, it's probably a little bit of both. I mean, wizards are the nerds who are studying their notes and endless pursuit of knowledge, and the sorcerer is the villain from an 80s college movie who just busts in the door and is just the jackass with the popped collar because he's born with it. He's got rich daddy or whatever. In this case, you're not quite the mutants of the Marvel world, but you have like that inheritance. You have the bloodline. It's whatever gave you your power. Instead of you making a pact with such an entity, as the warlock does, instead maybe you were born with it. You were an unwitting creation of magical aptitude. In any case, I think sorcerers are cooler than wizards, and I do think this book is a little bit cooler. It draws from a little bit more outlandish when it comes to how you got your origin, including a lot of inspiration from monsters like liches and Medusa and beholders and mind flayers and vampires, basically really getting dangerously close to overlapping what would have been a new like racial archetype book, for example, is instead integrate that into the subclass and manifest that into your subclass abilities, which is pretty interesting. I think there are some balancing concerns here and there with some of these subclasses, just based on my reading of them and my knowledge of D&D. But for the most part, I think they do a pretty good job, and there's a pretty solid variety in here, which obviously with 31 archetypes you are most likely going to get. And the nice thing about using a bunch of different designers is you're going to get a lot of different viewpoints on what we can use as sorceress origins. I'm going to go through some of my favorites because this is almost a 100-page supplement, and it's going to be a bit too much to break down every single one of these classes and all their abilities. But similar to, like exactly the same as Blackstaff's Tome of Wizardry, every single subclass here has new spells, which is how you end up getting over 100 new spells. And the spells, for the most part, are pretty damn good, and specifically thematically tied to that subclass, to where that subclass gains new spells, and at least half of them are going to be new spells that come from this book. And I really like that the spells are included in every single subclass. You don't have to just reference a back page and constantly flip pages. Thank you so much for organizing it that way. And it's included in all these different indexes, so you can easily find, the spells organized in different ways, like by class level or by class or by level or alphabetically or whatever you need, which is a huge, huge help. So really thumbs up on all these spells. And what's interesting is that when I review this and look at each class, I have to include the new spells as part of the class's abilities, which I don't think I did a good job of if I'm going to be critical of my review of Blackstaff's Tome of Wizardry, where I mentioned the fact that I think that some of the spells in that supplement overshone the abilities. And that's that can happen in this supplement as well, but now I'm a little more forgiving of that, because that's a big part of being a sorcerer is you're casting your spells. And if you have specific spells thematically designed for your class, who's to say that's not really kind of part of your class abilities at that point? And some classes do that in a really, really well done manner, to where the abilities maybe aren't that exciting, the actual ones you get at like 1st level, 6th level, 14th, etc., versus the new spells that you get, which exactly manifest the kind of things that you want to do. Maybe because they thought, well, in order to activate this ability, you're gonna have to spend a spell slot, in which case you're just casting a spell. So I'm not actually opposed to that way of doing it. I also really like that all of these classes include what I think came later on in Xanathar's. I can't remember if the original Player's Handbook actually had this. It's been a while since I cracked that book open. But there were tables designed to help you with role-playing or creating your character and determining how they actually became this sorceress origin, which I think is a really cool, critical part of building the character, and especially with, what is different about your character. How did you get these magic powers? Where do they come from? And in this case, not only does the subclass define that, but each subclass has its own like D6 table of different, just aesthetic things that to where your magic manifests some way physically or emotionally, or your backstory or something. It's just a really cool addition that I like seeing. All right, so the ones that I enjoy, Alchemist is actually one, which is kind of almost a straight better version of the Artificer Alchemist. You can spend your blood is basically magical, and you can spend hit dice to create a potion, and that potion can have whatever spell you want in it, and then you can essentially bank those spells for future use for other people to use. So it's just a really fun way, and I think it's actually thematic if you like just pumping your own magic blood and letting people drink it. Maybe a little bit weird, but it's a solid ability rather than having to do a random table for your alchemy that the poor artificer has to do. The Ceramorphosis, which I, along with a lot of people, learned about during the Baldur's Gate 3 announcement and trailer with the whole Mind Flayer thing. Just a really cool idea for a Sorcerer's Bloodline, and this one really begins what is all of the monstrous ones that are based on either aberrations or undead or monsters. It feels like half. It's probably not half, but it feels like half of the subclasses here are based on existing monsters in D&D, to where it would make sense. Like, they're spellcasting foes, and if for whatever reason, like, you have been imbued with that magic. In this case, it's a lot of, intelligence-based spells or protections that you can deflect off, or you can, like, read people's thoughts and things, or if somebody tries to read yours, you can deal psychic damage. This is a case where the abilities might not have been the most exciting, but one of the spells is that you can deal a crap ton of psychic damage. In this case, 10d6 plus 40 psychic damage is a 6th level spell, and if that kills somebody, then their brain pops out and becomes an intellect devourer. Technically not under your control, but still views you as at least not a threat. So I thought that was a really cool way of saying, hey, you want to be, you want your class to be infused with Mind Flayer abilities. Well, you're not going to literally be a Mind Flayer, but maybe you can play around with some of their abilities and spells, which is neat. The Cosmic Bloodline, I really think this is a neat idea, but does have some balancing concerns for me. This one has to do with like the stars and the moon and the sun and all that. And every time you short or long rest, you can choose to align yourself with one of 4 different parts of the cosmos, which is stars, sun, moon, or void. And I like any kind of ability that lets me change or adapt choices, or let me pick my own choices or whatever, and this is a cool way of doing that. At first level, it's not a whole lot of difference. You can add like 1 extra damage if you're dealing AoE spells or something, depending on whatever you're doing. But at 6th level, and it does a good job of, as you level up, whatever forms you're choosing gain new abilities. But at 6th level, they get really crazy already at 6th level. If you're tied to the stars, you can teleport up to your speed as an action, which is pretty huge. It doesn't seem to cost anything. Or if you take the moon alignment, you gain a flight speed equal to your walking speed. That's like 6th level. That seems a little bit crazy for that quick of all these very, very useful utility movement abilities. For page 27, yes, I had to write down page numbers because that's what you get when I review a 100-page document. I don't know how to pronounce this, but it's basically blood magic. Erythrocyte, maybe something to do with blood. Blood magic, obviously a big part of a lot of fantasy RPGs, not so much in D&D, so I appreciate seeing it whenever it's used as a subclass. In this case, you can expend hit dice to regain spell slots, and then you can spend sorcery points to regain hit points. So you can kind of do an interesting little loop right there and manage your own life, sorcery points, and spell slots. Something's going to give at some point, but it's a neat way to for you to be a little bit more self-sufficient about all your things. And then this one has a nice blood magic spells, including the ability to like suck your own blood out of your pores and fire it as a dart that does like fireball damage, like 66 necrotic damage, which is pretty neat. The Eye Tyrant, obviously Beholder. This is a case where all the abilities were really kind of boring. You gain proficiency in the perception skill, and you're immune to blinded. You do gain some more abilities when you level up higher. You gain you can see invisible and ethereal creatures at 13th level. Whenever you fire a beam type spell at somebody, like Ray of Cold or whatever the other ones are, you gain advantage onto attack rolls, or you can impose disadvantage on the saving throws. You're just better with those abilities. These are not any kind of exciting, crazy abilities. 14th level you can fly. At least that one's 14 and not 6. But then you get to this 8th level spell called Crown of the Beholder, which is literally just you gain all of the eye beams of a beholder that just are like orbs that float around you. And as a it lasts for a minute, and it doesn't require concentration. You cast it once and all the orbs appear, and then as a bonus action for that minute, you can just fire off all these rays, and it's all the rays from the beholders. You got your death ray, your slow ray, your fear ray, your paralyzation ray, sleep ray, petrification ray, all that good stuff. And this is what started making me realizing, okay, so you didn't want to make this a class ability because it's so crazy that you wanted to wait until they were very high level. In this case, I don't know what 8th level is, but I think you're solidly tier 4 at that point. So I understand why you'd want to just wait until they were high enough level and you could use a spell slot for it. And this is what made me think maybe if the abilities aren't as exciting, the spells make up for it. And in this case, I mean, literally you just turn into a beholder effectively at that point once you've cast that spell. So it's an interesting idea, and it's just a different way of having to look at subclasses that are spell focused, and especially with all of these subclasses because they're all given new spells, and those new spells are effectively baked into all your class abilities because you're going to gain all these spells, as official spells into your. Because sorcerers are very limited on what spells they have, so any of these bonus spells are really going to make a big difference in your class build. So I do appreciate having that's there, and a lot of the other abilities have to do with, beholderness also. At page 40, we have the Hatred Driven. There are some really oddly named subclasses here. But the Hatred Driven, as you can imagine, is inspired by Barbarians. The Barbarian Sorcerer is not a common multi-class, but if you wanted to have a rage type ability, in this case it's called Angered State as a bonus action, your strength increases by an amount equal to your proficiency bonus, and any damaging spells you do, you can add your strength modifier to that spell. So if you want to be a big hulking sorcerer, you certainly can, which... a sorcerer to me is just, your charisma could be willpower. It's just your sense of will. So there's no reason why you couldn't be a bodybuilder and just have that big sense of will. Unlike wizards, who are nerds, who sit in the library and read their books. And that would be weird. No, it's all right, wizards. Calm down. You gain extra attack. You can have, as a spell, you can do a group rage, and everybody can get the effects of a rage. A dumb name for a subclass, but actually kind of cool ideas if you wanted to be just a bodybuilding sorcerer who uses a lot of strength and can be very, very angry. Kinetic Mind is an interesting thing with Mage Armor, where you have to cast Mage Armor using your highest available spell slot, which is bad because Mage Armor is normally a first level spell that does not scale. So that's the negative part of it. On the positive part, when you turn on this special power, which, by the way, you can cast it as a ritual, but it just does cost a spell slot equal to the highest level spell slot you can cast, you gain all these new abilities, and these abilities last for however long Mage Armor lasts, I guess. You can attack twice, you gain the dash action, you can run up and down walls. You basically just turn on this super powered movement battle mode whenever you enter it's called inertial armor. So neat idea with taking one spell and just running with it. And I especially like a lot of classes, and a lot of this do this, and it's tricky with sorcerers is at first level, is you front load the cool ability and then you add to it as you level up. That's a tricky thing to do for those classes that gain their first ability at first level, because you don't want to overpower obviously first level characters too much, and you don't get your next one till 6th level. So it's very, very tricky to strike that balance between adding some cool new flavor ability that makes you different from other sorcerers while still not giving you too much to do, but still something more interesting than just, hey, advantage on blah, blah, blah. And then adding to it as you level up, which a lot of these subclasses do a really good job of doing. Let me see, where are we? The Lich. So Lich is honestly a great example for the origins of how you became a Lich. I'm actually going to read some of these off because this is something I've been glossing over this whole time, although I mentioned earlier, is every single one of these subclasses has that D6 table of how did you become this subclass. And they're actually really, really cool. So in this case for the Lich, it changes quite a bit. An ancestor became a Lich, and in doing so sent shockwaves of necromantic energy or magic through your family's bloodline. So you had an ancestor Lich. Or you were once a powerful wizard who attempted the dark ascension to Lichdom but failed, and now you got, recreated as like a level 1 sorcerer who's got some Lich powers. Or your soul was imprisoned in a Lich's phylactery, but you were rescued before you could be consumed, and that gave you some Lich powers. Or you experimented on a Lich, or you had possessed a Lich's phylactery and then got affected by those powers. All of these things are very different, very interesting ways of featuring Lichdom powers onto your character. So I thought that's just a really, really cool idea and a lot of variety there. And I want to use that as an example because I thought those were probably some of the best ones that I'd read. The Lich, there's again some balancing concerns here, but at least here you have to choose one Lich power of your choice at 9th, 12th, and 15th level. You gain one more, you gain the first one at 6th level, and then you gain additional ones as you level up. And they are literally all the stuff from the Lich stat block. So Paralyzing Touch, Disrupt Life, Frightening Gaze, and Summon Undead. All of that is straight out of the Lich stat block, or a Serac, whatever Lich you like. And then eventually you can even craft your own phylactery that can consume souls, and you can use those souls to replenish your own spell slots. And hit points. So it's a cool ability. I don't know, the balance is really hard to comment on, but at least here you only get one of those and then you pick them as you level up. There's others where you automatically gain new abilities as you level up, and that becomes a bit too much, which is how the Ghost works. Oh, where are you, Ghost? Yeah, the Ghost bloodline. So in this case, you gain all the powers of a ghost, in addition to being undead and having all those benefits and none of the drawbacks. So you have advantage against poison damage. You don't need to eat, drink, or breathe anymore. You don't age. And then you start gaining all the abilities. At 6th level, you gain incorporeality. At 9th level, Pierce the Veil. You can cross into the ethereal realm. At 12th level, you can possess people. And at 15th level, you gain that Scream it's the Scream. Well, yeah, it's a Scream. It's the Ghostbuster, the original from the early Ghostbusters, where she turns and looks and it screams. Ability. Literally, somebody just looked at the Ghost stat block and said, I want to give a player all these abilities. Well, I guess you could do that, but you're also still giving them other abilities in addition to all these things, including at 14th level, able to raise specters when they die. That becomes a little bit much. So at least with the Lich, you had to pick and choose as you leveled up, although eventually I think you got all of them. Here, you get all of them as you level up, and then you additionally get even more abilities. So as much as I like the Lich, there's probably a little too much there in terms of you're just gaining all these fancy new monstrous abilities. And again, these are not the only ones. There's more about it. But think about it, the Beholder one, where it was only very specific, like, hey, you get these few abilities, and then it's the spells that actually empower you to do these things. Whereas ones like the Ghost and the Lich, and later on when you get to the Medusa, those ones, you do gain all of those monster abilities right into your character sheet, basically. And then in addition to that, you have a lot of thematically appropriate spells. In fact, for the Ghost, you gain abilities to God, that's a hard-ass word to say. You can move through shit, and you can possess people if you just wanted to use spell slots instead of your limited per-use abilities. So There are some concerns there when it comes to balance, because I think giving players the ability to essentially transform into these powerful undead monster threats might be a little bit too much. And speaking of which, we're actually going to go to one of the more unbalanced ones, I think, is the Battlemind, where at first level, so right off the bat, you whenever you roll initiative, you gain temporary hit points equal to 1d6 plus your sorcerer level. When you gain these temporary, or while you still have these temporary hit points, so as long as you have them, you have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. That's pretty huge. Now, granted, it's, until you get hit like once or twice, but still. When you gain temporary hit points from this feature, you can choose one weapon in 5 feet of you, proficient with, and then you can become proficient with it, and you can use your charisma modifier for the attack and damage rolls. That is a lot of nice things at first level. So again, every time you roll initiative at the start of every fight, you're gaining temporary hit points that scale, you're gaining resistance, and you're gaining proficiency to any weapon, basically, and you can use your charisma modifier to attack. And then, of course, you gain extra attack at 6th level, and you gain even more, and you can cast spells using your sorcery points. It really feels like somebody was like, what are all the best things in order to make a classic, like, melee, also sorcerer class? In other words, the Hexblade of sorcerers. And this is it, and it feels... And, the Hexblade is good, but also is almost too good. People take it as a dip class, and I would fear that would be the same case for the Battlemind, is that it's just so powerful instantly. Like every fight, you can just turn on this automatic powerful ability that has no limitations whatsoever every time you're fighting. That becomes a little bit too much. So those are some of the more balancing concerns that I have. A good example of the way spells work, and I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but that's the way my notes work. The way spells complement abilities in a better way, maybe not in an unbalanced way, is the Mistborn. This is one where I started reading it and thought, okay, this is a neat idea. Your character is based around being, I don't know, like a creepy fog creature almost, except you're just adept at being in fog, not like you're necessarily fog yourself, at least until later on you can turn into gaseous form. Your actual abilities are that you can just basically see through fog, you can cast Misty Step in fog, and then eventually you become immune to the effects of fog, which I thought, okay, isn't the same as being able to see through fog? That's pretty much what fog does. But then you get to the spells, and the spells are what actually defines this subclass. Acid Fog allows you to make this choking, green, damaging acid fog. Creeping Fog allows you to have fog that continually builds and builds and builds. Freezing Cloud is just slows everybody down, and they take cold damage. Mist Tendrils turns like your arms into giant, creepy-ass, like, arm snake fog things that it can attack people or can hold weapons. These are all really cool abilities, but they're not abilities, they're just spells. They're just spells that the Mistborn can learn, but then their abilities work very well in conjunction with these spells. So I thought this, probably better than any other subclass, is a great example of how these spells very nicely complement the abilities in a lot of cases, and can create, both of those together can create a balanced subclass. Whereas if you were looking at just one or the other, you wouldn't necessarily think anything special about this class. And that's really the best example I can use. I mean, we can go over some other ones. In terms of other ones that I enjoyed, the Nomad Mind is all about teleporting around, which is very fun and useful and fairly original. The Medusa Born, similar to all the monster ones, you gain the ability to you gain all the Medusa powers. At least early on, it's not that upsetting. At 6th level, you have like acid blood, I guess. I don't know, Medusa's acid blood. Medusa's acid blood. They can, I guess, stab themselves and create and coat their own weapons in poison. And it's not till 14th level where you can actually just straight up turn into a Medusa. And then 18th level, you can petrify people. So that one at least feels a little bit more balanced than, say, the Lich and the Ghost. The Raven Queen, I don't know much about the Raven Queen, to be honest, but all the abilities sound really highly thematic. I really liked the Fate's Favor ability, in that anytime you have advantage or disadvantage, you can choose to bank the other roll that you don't use and save it, similar to the way the Divination Wizard works. I just thought that was an interesting way of using what usually you don't even think about the other dice. And otherwise, it's a whole bunch of interesting Raven Queen abilities that I'm not quite aware of, again, the Raven Queen, how it works. The Sanguine Raptor allows you to touch various creatures and gain their abilities, although not their attacks, which is, again, how it's trying to balance things out. The best one being you could gain, like, flight speed or climbing speed or swim speed from animals. You can gain resistances or immunities. You can gain their natural armor class. Just it requires you to, like, touch them and then gain that stuff. I just think that was a really interesting thing to do for a sorcerer spellcaster. The Spellfire Wielder, which is another really weird-ass name for something. Spellfire is apparently this raw magic element, and you just gain dice, kind of like Bardic Inspiration that you can use for yourself. And whenever you cast spells or do things, you can then roll that dice to kind of help you do other things, including rolling one of your cantrips as a free like bonus action whenever you're casting a spell. And then as you level up, those dice can even do more and more things, and they literally level up similar to Bardic Inspiration, where it's D6, D8, D10. I love anything that gives me dice to roll, whether it's the fighter, what is it, the maneuver one, they give you the dice, all that stuff is really fun. And then the final one I'll talk about is the Twinned Origin, which is literally designed for 2 players to play as the freaking Wonder Twins together. And they share their own resources, their hit points, their spell slots, and all that, and they gain new abilities based on that. It is wildly crazy and nothing I have ever seen or reviewed before, so that automatically gets me a very interesting thumbs up, even though I'd be very scared about introducing that concept in a D&D game. But if you want 2 players to play sorcerer twins that have their powers twinned together, that is just fascinating. So really, really neat ideas all around. And overall, I think I do like this one more than the Wizard School. My complaints about balance, here and there notwithstanding, it's just, I don't know, maybe I just find the monster inspirations interesting, even the ones that are a little too much. Sorcerer is just cooler than Wizards, come on. All right, pros and cons for Blackstaff's Book of Bloodlines. Pro, 31 new sorceress origins, from beholders, mind flayers, and liches to blood magic, cursed magic, and even hatred magic. Pro, every subclass has 3 to 5 thematically designed spells for over 120 new spells. And the spells, you could honestly get this just for the spells if you wanted to, but I think the spells actually do a really good job of being tied specifically to those subclasses, and really are, as I mentioned, like a part of building those classes together and a part of complementing those abilities. In Pro, those spells are organized by name, level, school, and class. At the very end of the index, we can see right here. So really helpful to find all those spells that you want them. And I'm really happy that they included the spells as part of the classes and not just all at the end together, so I don't have to freaking flip back and forth all the time. My only con is that there are balance concerns with certain subclasses and abilities. A lot of the monster ones, like the Lich and the Ghost, or like the Battlemind, that are just feel too powerful to where I can just tell players abusing those mechanics and abilities. And, I get wanting to play as a cool monstrous, race and have those abilities, but it gets a little too crazy, especially when I've reviewed out there racial supplements that painstakingly try to put those in balance, and then all of a sudden this one offers subclasses that just give you all those abilities as part of their subclass, in addition to other abilities and spells, which is getting really crazy. Final verdict: inspired by monstrosities, fiends, fae, and undead, Blackstaff's Book of Bloodlines features a welcome variety of outlandish and not so outlandish sorcerer subclasses and spells. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Thank you.